This is the region known as South Tyrol. It takes its name from Upper Tyrol, or as it is known in Austria, just Tyrol. The reason why it has the same name, despite being a part of Italy, is that it used to belong to Austria at the time of the Holy Roman Empire, and then later the Austro-Hungarian Empire too. Throughout the times, ever since the establishment of an Italian national identity and then the unification of their territory, this area has been the subject of a territorial dispute between them and Austria. And since the end of World War I, it has been effectively controlled by the Italians, but some locals and some neighbors in Austria still claim that it should be returned to the Eastern Kingdom. After all, German is the most spoken language there, reaching about 90% of the population in most of the territory, so why is it still Italian? It's important to say that this dispute has sort of died down by now. It was at its peak in the 20th century, but it still exists in a quiet mode, sort of. The origins of Tyrol trace back to ancient times, when the area was divided among Roman provinces. The lower valleys became part of Roman Italy, while the higher regions were administered through Raetia and Noricum, an interesting parallel to the Austrian North and Italian South split that we see in modern times. After the fall of the Roman Empire, it came under Gothic, Lombard, and Frankish rule. By the 8th century, Bavarian settlers had moved into the region, introducing a Germanic cultural and linguistic identity that would shape the cultural identity of it until today. It was a bit chaotic during the Middle Ages in terms of who controlled it, but eventually the county of Tyrol emerged in the 12th century and developed into a cohesive political entity under the Holy Roman Empire. By 1363, the Habsburgs acquired the county of Tyrol. They incorporated it into what would later become the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and by the 19th century, the region formed an integral part of Austria's mountainous southern provinces. There's also, however, an interesting interlude to Austrian rule. It came during the age of Napoleon, and it happened in 1809 after the French and allied Bavarian armies had occupied the territory. The locals rose up in what became known as the Tyrolean Rebellion. In the same way that the old Roman Empire split is still reflected in today's reality, the independence movement shows sort of an historical echo of this rebellion too. 80,000 people rose up against the French-led forces, but were eventually suppressed and defeated. But when Napoleon ended up being defeated himself, the territory remained under Habsburg control. It's interesting how that old imperial county of Tyrol actually included not only North Tyrol, part of Austria today, and South Tyrol, which is part of Italy, but also another Italian territory today, Trentino, which, as far as I know, the independence movement or the return to Austria movement don't claim, only claiming South Tyrol. But anyway, let's get back to the history. Right now, it's the start of the 20th century, and Austria-Hungary controls all of this territory, but then comes World War I, and it is believed by most that the reason why Italy entered the war against the Central Powers was precisely to acquire Trentino and South Tyrol among some other regions. It all has to do with the Treaty of London of 1915. At this time, the Entente was at a standstill with the Central Powers. Having Italy enter the war would open a new front, forcing Germany and Austria to divert some troops there, and potentially allow the British and French to push forward. The treaty was a secret agreement between the United Kingdom, France, Russia, and Italy. The Entente powers wanted to entice Italy to enter the Great War on their side. The agreement involved promises of Italian territorial expansion against Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and in Africa, where it was promised enlargement of its colonies. This map shows us precisely which they were, with South Tyrol and Trentino being a key part of the agreement. While Italy did get some of these territories after the war, the agreement wasn't fully fulfilled, which, according to some, contributed to the rise of Mussolini and Italian support of Germany in World War II, but that is another story. Now, the video you're watching right now is something that, like all videos, has a lot of steps in its production. It's the script writing, the audio, the maps, the sourcing of old images, but also the use of stock footage. And I can tell you what a nightmare that last step usually is. You either have free sites where you can get some stock footage, but it's not exactly what you want, or the ones that you pay for and are unbelievably expensive that allow you to find what you usually are looking for. And those, each clip costs a fortune. But thankfully there is a solution, which happens to be the sponsor of today's video, Storyblocks. Storyblocks is a stock media subscription service with a huge library of stock video, images, audio, and more. And what sets them apart is that you get unlimited downloads of diverse, high-quality media for one predictable subscription cost. That's it. You pay once a month and you get access to everything, and it's actually high-quality material. All of the clips that you saw in this video came from Storyblocks. For those same clips, if I had used a free service, they wouldn't have been so good, or they would have cost me a fortune, blowing away the budget for this video. Not only are they great for that, but they also help you streamline your production process overall because they offer thousands of pre-made video templates for editing, like After Effects, Premiere Pro, or DaVinci Resolve. I use Premiere Pro for my videos and I'm trying to learn After Effects, and they're saving me a lot of time in that process. To get started with unlimited stock media downloads at one set price, head to storyblocks.com/general knowledge, or just click the link in the description and try it out today. And now let's get back to the video. The reason why the Italians wanted this was mostly the fact that there were a good number of ethnic Italians in the region, and also a desire by the part of the Italian government that the Alpine mountains would form a natural northern border for the country. And so, after the war, Trentino and Cisalpine Tyrol, later known as South Tyrol, came under Italian administration. But this annexation flew in the face of the self-determination principles promoted by US President Woodrow Wilson, and it brought around 150,000 German speakers under Italian rule with no consultation or vote. You can imagine those locals didn't love the change, and they loved it even less with the rise to power of Benito Mussolini in 1922. His new government had a strong desire for cultural assimilation via a policy of Italianization, which essentially wanted to eliminate the German language in speech and education in the region, as well as everyday use, such as dual languages notices on road signs and in advertisements. There were dozens of measures that they applied to do this. Some of the most relevant were exclusive use of Italian in the public offices, closure of the majority of the German schools, and also incentives for immigrants from other Italian regions. These actions sowed even more seeds for long-lasting resentment of the locals that had German heritage and identity. At this time, another similar guy was starting his rise to power in Germany, wanting to control all areas where Germans lived, among some other ones. And so the disputes started flaring up a little more. But thankfully for them, they were pretty close in ideology, so at the cost of the locals, they figured out a solution. Under the South Tyrol Option Agreement of 1939, the two countries agreed to compel South Tyroleans who resisted Italianization to immigrate into the Greater Germanic Reich. The majority, facing relentless pressure, chose to leave, becoming known as the Optanten, while a minority, the Dablieber, chose to stay, Trentino province, diluting the intended autonomy. Frustrations grew among South Tyroleans who believed that the spirit of the agreement had been betrayed. In the 1950s and 60s, dissatisfaction boiled over into violence. A clandestine secessionist group, the South Tyrolean Liberation Committee, launched a campaign of sabotage against Italian infrastructure. Although the group initially avoided civilian casualties, violence escalated in the following years, and this attracted international attention, and Austria is still formally responsible for the protection of South Tyroleans under the 1946 agreement brought the issue to the United Nations. And so, in 1960, the UN passed Resolution 1497, encouraging both sides to negotiate a peaceful solution. Under growing international pressure, Italy and Austria agreed on a new set of measures that would ultimately be enacted as the Second Autonomy Statute in 1972. The new autonomy arrangement fundamentally changed South Tyrol's position within Italy. It devolved most political, administrative, and financial powers directly to the province of Bolzano-Bozen. German was recognized as a co-official language alongside Italian, employment in public services was made proportional to linguistic groups, and schools were organized along language lines. Cultural institutions were protected, and the province retained roughly 90% of its tax revenue. By the early 90s, Austria formally declared the dispute resolved, and the South Tyrol region entered a phase of relative peace and prosperity. Today, they're one of the wealthiest regions in Italy, and they serve as a model of peaceful ethnic coexistence in many aspects. Cross-border cooperation with the Austrian state of Tyrol proper and the autonomous Trentino region of Italy has flourished, particularly within the context of the EU's Euro region Tyrol, South Tyrol, Trentino, which is essentially the old borders of the Austro-Hungarian region. Euro regions are a pretty fascinating concept that I feel nobody, including myself, knows about. Maybe a video on that would be interesting. Regardless, many South Tyroleans today identify primarily as South Tyrolean rather than Italian or even Austrian, expressing a complex and pretty hybrid regional identity which is rooted in that language, tradition, and geography. A strong independence movement continues to operate within now legal and democratic frameworks. One of the most vocal groups is the South Tyrolean Freedom. They call for a referendum on self-determination and envision either full independence or reunification with Austria. In an unofficial online poll conducted by the party, over 90% of 61,000 respondents favored secession from Italy. Though non-binding, the results revealed a persistence of a nationalist sentiment, particularly among younger German-speaking South Tyroleans. The supporters of independence argued that despite official bilingualism and legal protections, Italian centralism remains the reality. They cite bureaucratic inefficiencies, occasional lack of use of German language services in national agencies, and what they view as cultural insensitivity, such as the continued presence of fascist-era monuments and the Italianization of names and public spaces. Additionally, they stress the artificial nature of Italian rule, arguing that the region's inclusion in Italy was the result of wartime opportunism rather than any legitimate popular mandate. But for many, the European Union's principle of open borders, combined with transnational cooperation, offers a third option, one that kind of transcends traditional national boundaries. In this vision, South Tyrol doesn't need to choose between Italy or Austria or even be independent, because they're their own European region already. But who knows, maybe one day they'll become their own independent microstate. I guess it's up to them to choose. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you to my patrons for their direct support. If you want to join us over on Patreon, make sure to do so as well. And either way, I will see you next time for more general knowledge.